Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And so today I have something special for you guys. I am going to show you how I resin a painting. And so usually when I'm doing resin on a painting, I can do it over a canvas depending on the size, and also a wood board or cradle wood, which is usually bigger sizes and they can hold a lot more resin on those pieces of wood. But today it's going to be a canvas, and it is a 12 by 24 inch canvas. It's going to be pretty. I can't wait to show you. You'll see step by step as far as what I do, how I prep it, and also the final version of the actual painting. So stay tuned. I'll be using art resin. So there is the resin and there is the hardener, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio when mixing your resin. Here's my stick and also the cup that I'll be using. Now, don't forget some gloves and other protective wear when using resin. So, for example, a respirator if you're not in a well ventilated place. So, here's what I'll be doing today. So, here's the piece. Here's my resin calculator. And this is where I can enter the length and width of my canvas. And it's going to show me how much resin I need to use. Now, I'm going to be mixing the resin. And so, when mixing, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes. Again, read the direction on the particular resin that you use in terms of how long it takes to mix the resin. You want to mix it well, you want to mix it in one direction, and make sure that you're scraping the sides of your cup or your mixing tool, so that way you're able to get all the resin together. You don't want to have part of your resin nicely mixed while the other part is not, because you're not going to have the good consistency when you're pouring your resin on your project. And so I'm going to mix quickly for 3-4 minutes. So I'm going to speed up the video. Look at that consistency. It's nice. It's liquid. But don't forget to clean off your canvas. So I already cleaned it off video, but I'm showing you again just how you wipe it off. And again, I have my gloves because your fingers will have oils on them. And with that oil, if you put it on your canvas, when you spread the resin and let it dry, you'll see spots that the resin pulled from. And that's where that can get created when you have oil versus when you have oil from silicone or your fingertips or anything else that can get on there, can create these craters that make your canvas not look even when it's spreading with the resin. And so just be careful when doing that. So I like to use my gloves when spreading the resin on my canvas because I can feel it, I can make sure it's even, and I can give it a nice even spread throughout the canvas. Now, I didn't add everything on the canvas just yet, but you'll see why. But so far, just spreading it off to the sides, nice and smooth. Take your time. You don't have to rush this, and you don't want to rush this either. There is a working time with resin. So some resins allow you a 30-minute working window, some less, some a little bit longer. I like art resin because you get a little bit longer of a working window. You'll see that when you're working with a resin and you're experimenting, the longer you're working with it, it starts to heat up and it becomes hot. And when it becomes hot, it starts to get a little bit harder to manipulate at times. And so you want to make sure that you're moving quote unquote quickly, but not rushing through your project. And so if you're new to resin, you can do some trial and errors with smaller canvases or smaller boards or whatever you want to try it on. But just make sure that you read the directions and you are safe when using resin. When you're spreading across the canvas, don't forget the sides. People always ask, what do you do about the drips on the sides? How do you handle it? How do you get rid of it? And so on the side of my canvas, I have tape, but the tape doesn't go all the way up on the sides. It leaves about a quarter of that dimension. So that way part of it will be covered with resin while the other part is not. That's just my preference, but you can do the entire sides full of resin, or you don't have to do resin on the sides at all. But if you do, don't forget the sides. Now I have a toothpick in hand, and that is to use it for spots that are going to be with bubbles. So for example, when I use my heat gun, it's going to definitely pop those big air bubbles. However, there's going to be some tiny small ones that I probably missed. So I'll go and take a look at it and pop them with my toothpick. But there's also going to be dust or debris or whatever in the air. So I also use my toothpick to get rid of those things also. When using the heat gun or torch across your resin, one, you don't want to be too close, and two, you do not want to stay in the same spot for a long time because you can literally burn the resin, which can burn your project. And once you burn your project, I don't know how you can fix that. Maybe you can embellish, but you don't want to burn the resin. So be very careful because the heat gun makes it very hot. And you want to make sure that when you're using the heat gun and you put it off to the side, don't touch that area with your hands or any part of your body because it is still very, very hot. So be very careful when using your heat gun. You want to keep it out of your way. You don't want to trip over it because you can definitely hurt yourself. So you'll see that there are some spots that I want to pick off, and those are some smaller air bubbles and also some debris that I'm just removing from the canvas. I sometimes go back and use a torch just for an overall quick jab at it so that way I can make sure that there are no bubbles, because when you use like the ring light or any kind of bright light on the canvas, you can actually see if there's any spots that either are missing resin or have debris that fell into it while you were working, or just something that needs to be addressed at that time. And so you'll see me using the torch in just a little bit just to quickly go over some stuff. Now I'm adding more resin because there were some areas that I felt like could use more on the edges. Because the one thing you don't want is you have a nice coat of resin, but then when you come back when it's dried, you notice that the edges don't have full coverage. That's usually because you either had resin pull from the sides and go down off the edges, or you just didn't have enough to cover the canvas in general. So you want to make sure that when you put resin on the sides, or even if you don't, you still want to scrape under your canvas to make sure that you get any drips off. And not just one time, but for resin, you have to almost babysit your project. So I have to go back several times within that first hour just to make sure that I'm catching all the drips and just scraping them off the sides. Because after about an hour or so, the resin starts to set in, and so it's not going to move as much. But prior to that, it definitely flows because it is self-leveling. And so that's why you want to make sure that your surface is very even on all sides. You can even use one of those tools that you can make sure that everything is nicely centered. But don't forget, scrape the sides because you don't want the resin to pull off, and don't forget to babysit your project. Another important tool is the coverage. So once you're done with resin and you're waiting for your stuff to dry, what do you do with it, right? Because you don't want things to fall in it. And so what I do is I put bigger cups around the canvas, and then I grab an even bigger canvas and I put it on top of the cup so that way it covers my canvas. Don't let it touch though. And then what I do is I put a drape over that entire thing so that way it prevents dust from even coming inside of that. So that's one way I do it, and I just leave it covered. But then when I come back within the hour to scrape the sides, I just take it off. I look again on the canvas to make sure there's no other debris. I scrape my sides and then I cover it back. It could be definitely tedious, but it is worth it if you want your project to look nice and clean once it's completely done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. You'll see pictures up close. In the black, you see that there are sparkles because I did mix some of my gold within the black just to make it sparkle because I like sparkles. And then you'll see the final pictures towards the very end. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you next week.